Hi, I'm Gerben.
Hi, I'm Jelle. Gerben?
Jelle.
Yeah, so normally we do the play pretend where, I don't know what you're talking about, but I think you're talking about this, right? And you say, yeah, and then you do the entire spiel that we've both seen before. So this time, I know the 3 words, Azure Container Jobs, that you're going to talk about, but I actually have no idea what that means.
Do you know container apps? Do you ever play with container apps?
No, play? No. Do I know what they are? Yes.
Okay. So today
but let's pretend that they don't know.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about container app jobs. So first then a little introduction / recap about what is container apps. So I have here the nice documentation. Azure Container Apps is a serverless platform. You can think of it as a serverless Azure Kubernetes cluster on which you can run container workloads. So initially Azure Container Apps, it's a fully managed environment that enables you to run containerized applications, like it says on the documentation.
Yeah, but you're sounding like a Microsoft spokesman right now. Yeah.
So initially it is there for you to, so the apps as an API endpoint, as a microservice, a workload that's there all the time for serving requests, serving websites.
Let's talk business-wise. What kind of applications are we talking about?
Yeah, it could be your API, it could be front-end web application, it could be a program listening to a queue, but then all the time. So here in this picture, this is more like a recap of what is Azure Container Apps. You can expose public API endpoints, you can do traffic routing, so you can do the 80-20 split. You can also publish a new endpoint and then switch over. You can do already some background processing, just have a program there. But Azure Container Apps, for the most part, was focused on API workloads, on front-end workloads.
Yeah, you say it was focused, so we're gonna get there, but this is not like 10 years old stuff, right?
No. So what we get into is what Azure Container Jobs is, and so that is specially designed to have one-off jobs. So jobs that you either run manually, that you trigger by an event, or maybe on a schedule. But we get into the details of those trigger types in some time. But to continue the story on what is container apps, it could do event processing, so it could trigger, for instance, on message queues, but it could trigger on all kinds of things, all kinds of services that we have on Azure, and that's all because of KEDA. And KEDA is a Kubernetes Autoscaler, event-driven Autoscaler, and that provides us with the possibility of also scaling a workload to 0.
Yes.
And then we don't have to pay for that resource usage,
which
is nice.
Otherwise, yeah.
So that in general is what was there on Azure Container Apps. So we can just deploy an application. But now there is a new offering, something that we can add on top of this platform. It is still containers, so it's just we run containers, but now we have a specific service that is there for jobs. So like it states here in the documentation, apps are there to run continuously. A job is there with a finite duration, and that's something. It starts, and then it exits and it ends. And it could start on, for instance, on what I said, on a schedule or manual.
And then what happens the rest of the time?
The rest of the time it's down. At least we will get into that if we get into the portal. We can tune how many instances are there. But when it exits, when it's down, it's actually down. So there is no application running then.
Interesting.
So a little bit, we already talked about what are the different scenarios for which we can use apps and jobs. I think this table really helps us for that, to choose between, because there is some overlap. If we want to listen, for instance, for a queue, And do we want to put that in an application or do we want to put that in a job? I think where you can make the decision is, do I need to trigger that job like all the time? If a message arrives, has to do something, and it has to run multiple times every minute, for instance, I think then a app is more, it's more there, and else you can just choose a job.
So is that mostly an architectural or a cost concern?
No, because I think it's the same. Maybe because you can switch the trigger type, so you could switch from a schedule to an event. Then you can, but underneath it's almost the same. If you want to use HTTP traffic, if you want to use that 80-20 split, then you definitely go for apps. So let's pick some. So if you want to process a single message or a small batch, then this table says, okay, you can pick a job. What's also nice, if you have a self-hosted GitHub action or runner or a pipeline agent and you want to trigger something, you can also use a job for that. If you want to run a Azure Function app, then you need apps, because that is specifically tailored to run functions. So
one of the rare cases where naming actually works in our favor.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, so you can run functions on Azure Container Apps if you want. Although in practice, I see that the overhead of the Azure Function runtime, that is even better to just make a small program, not include the Azure runtime, and then just listen to events, because you can trigger on the same kind of events than an Azure Function can, and then you don't need the overhead of the Azure Function runtime.
That makes sense.
Okay, so that's the scenarios when we want to use it. Then what kind of job trigger types? When we dive into the portal, we see that when we're going to create them, we can choose.
Yeah, but you've mentioned them. They're really basic.
Yeah. So manual, you can trigger it on demand. You can click on it, or you can use a CLI. A schedule uses a cron schedule, and event driven. We'll get into those specific types in the demonstration, but because I think it's nice.
You're really warming me up to this demonstration. Okay.
Okay. So this is all there is. Now over to the portal. So the first thing you have to do if you want to try this out is to create a container app environment. You can see that here. I already created one. If I look at this list, you can see there are already for every trigger. I will show them to you. Why? Because when you deploy a container app, it can take some time, sometimes minutes, before the app is there for you to look at. So you can also see that it is a combination. So we can see normal container apps, and we can see the jobs.
Yep. And you can just throw them all into the same environment.
Yes.
Would you ever want to differentiate by environment? Web plans, with the web app plans, would you like to differentiate, or is there no use? Yeah,
but that's when then you get a little bit more into detail of the really detailed thing about tuning a container app environment. And you can see here, for instance, workload profiles, and that's on what kind of type, what kind of machine do you want to run. So if you get a really big environment, a lot of workload, then I think you can make container environments different workload profiles.
So it's not like a resource group in Azure. It has a function, but it's maybe a bit above the.
I think you can see it the same as a Kubernetes cluster. I think in most companies there will be like one environment for every environment, testing, production, and then teams will share it. So teams will share the environment because the workloads itself, the containers, are isolated. So it's not that one can make it so that running the other is slow or something.
Makes sense. All right. So
now I want to show you how you can create them. You can create them on the portal. You can create them via the CLI. So in the portal you can click create, and then there's one thing that you see here is you can only create container apps from here. So you cannot use that create button, but certainly you can create a resource. Just normally if you search for the resource, I think that at some point it will be there. You will add it.
I'm assuming that this is not by design, indeed.
No. Maybe I'll file it as a bug.
I would have started going like, oh, that was very interesting. I'll try it myself, and just get stuck at the create button.
So that's important for the people who want to try this out.
Yeah.
In the portal, use as your search resource.
Yeah, and then you'll just assign it to the environment.
Yeah. So here you can see the list of the Container Apps jobs. We can go around and create one. So your normal stuff, resource group, you give it a name, you choose which container app environment you want, and that can be cross resource groups. You do need to have access, and then you choose which kind of trigger type you want. Do I want to have manual or schedule? In this case, we're going to create a manual one.
Is it hard to change the trigger type?
I did not actually yet try it. There are some different switches that you need to implement on different trigger types. I will get into some detail when we get into the CLI, because there you can see more of the options that you can use.
Yeah, because I assume that you'll start, for testing purposes, you'll want it manually driven, and then at some point you'll implement the event-driven or the cron job.
Yeah, but we'll see when we get into executing. For all the different types, you can also execute it manually. So if you do it on schedule or do it on event,
excellent.
You can also press the button or run a CLI command and say, okay, I want to execute it now.
Great.
So you can create the job here. You select where your image is. It could be your own ACR, so your own registry. It can be a Docker Hub or anything, and then you specify the image, specify the tag. You could even override the command, just the normal kind of controls that you would have when you do a container workload. Then you choose a profile, etc. And then you create everything. I already created one, so let's have a look. The manual one, so we can see that it's provisioned. It's already there. A nice little button saying run now. The image that I provisioned is just a very simple image provided by Microsoft. It does nothing more than just print something out to the console. What's also nice is all already integrated into a log workspace. So the logs are already there. So I could run it now. It says, okay, I've executed it. When we go to the execution history, we can see that we already run it. I already run it today, and now the other job is running. So let's look at the logs for just the job that I triggered already.
Yeah.
You have both console and system. So console is for the output of the application itself. You see here it jumps to your log workspace. You can see there's actually some other things going on, but if we look at our own container image, we see the BT jobs manual, and then this is the what we see here. This is the output that this image it says, okay, I'm start processing, and then it exits. So this demonstrates a workload that's doing that. So this is the manual type. We can also go into a schedule. So now let's go into a schedule. I want to go here, the environment, and then into the apps, and then into the schedule. So that's all the same. There's only one difference, and that's that there is a cron expression. So this follows normal cron rules. And again, if we look at the execution, before I had it on a schedule of 1 minute, and then I put it to a schedule of an hour. So you can change the schedule
on the
fly when it's running, and if we would have to take a look, it would have the same output. So this is the schedule.
Same image. It's just to show the trigger.
Yes.
Very cool. But now I think that what is probably the most powerful one.
Yes, and I think that's the one that will be used most in businesses. Is events. So we here have the events, and this is using the event-driven scaling. So we here have a scaling rule, and this is specific to jobs. Here it says min and max executions. So when we go to apps, it would say min or max replicas. So how many would be there? This is more tuned to jobs. So when a job is triggered, how many jobs should run, and we will get into some detail in the CLI. Also, you can specify how many can run, for instance, in parallel. How many should be retried, so that you have a lot of options to specify. You have more options to specify in the CLI than you can view in the portal, at least currently. So if we look into the scale rule, we can see that we have a custom rule type and that we are triggering on the Azure Queue. You have to specify the account name, the length, and the queue name itself. And you also, but that's something that you cannot arrange in the portal. You have to specify some secrets and you have to bind that secret. But it's also possible to specify an identity. So it can work with managed identities to access your Azure resources. So also to demonstrate this one, what I did, I had a queue, and you can see that it fired on that queue. Let's see if it's there and if we can trigger it, and if the demo gods are there for us today. And
otherwise, we'll just pause the screen and trigger it manually. So you don't know whether it succeeded.
A simple queue, the eventing queue that we already saw. We can put a message on it. So a test message.
It's a great message.
Now the message is there. We get to the apps. I made it so that it triggers every 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds we'll look into.
So at most we will have to fill 30 seconds of dead.
Yeah, but I have some extra information for you. We can look at the CLI, and then when we get back, the event is
30
processed.
seconds will have passed. Yes.
So if we look at the CLI, we have a lot of commands that we can execute, but the one that I think is important to know are all the parameters that you could use. And for instance, here you can see that you have things like secrets, so you can specify secrets here. You can also specify the scale rule and the metadata, and that's you have to know some details about the event type, so the event source that you are going to bind. But there are some nice examples, so every trigger type has some examples. And for instance, the one that I think is what you already said is the most, where we can learn the most is from the event type. And here you can see, for instance, that the min and max execution is set. The polling interval, in this case it's 30 seconds, but sometimes you can make it like 60 seconds, what you want. How many times it tries this, and completion. So you can specify all these kind of things, because what it does not do is, if your code is not dequeuing the message, the message stays on the queue, and then every 30 seconds the message will queue. So message processing, etc., has to happen. The only thing that the scaling rule is doing is looking, is there a event? And you can also specify, are there 10, or in this case I trigger it on 1. So you can see now that the job is running, it is triggered, and in sometimes we will get to the console output.
It takes about 30 seconds as well.
Yes. Yeah. So you can see that it already run, and here you see that effect that I said is that the message is still there.
Yeah.
So the message is still there, and every time it triggers, because this program is not doing anything with that message. So that's important to consider, and that's also where the settings are for, so the max execution and the parallelism. And when you read the message, it will lock the message, and then
but that's because you can have an entire job, almost an application running behind it that will do anything with the message, including not doing anything with the message.
Yes.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. And then the next time it will trigger again, because there's still a message on the queue.
Yeah.
So that's something that you need to look out for. That's it. That's everything that I want to tell you about jobs. So
I had no idea what was coming, but that was really cool.
And I think also the whole container app environment is getting more mature. So things like identity and the whole scaling, it's getting really up to speed and can be used in production.
It will reframe how we think about setting up dependencies between applications. So that's really, really interesting. a thinker.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching. Bye bye.
Bye.